This is AmericasDemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. I'm your host, Jim Cuddy. On today's show, Kathleen Kennedy Townsend takes on Sarah Palin for her attack on John F. Kennedy. The Democratic pollster who beat Gingrich says the 2010 election may cripple Democrats for a generation. And an arms control expert on why the Republicans are threatening U.S. security by playing politics with the treaty with Russia. Are you tired of Tea Party Republicans, Glenn Beck and Sarah Palin dominating our country? Do you want to hear the facts, not the right-wing spin? Do you want to hear the insights of progressive Democrats? Do you want the facts you won't get on Fox or even on CNN? Then stay tuned. AmericasDemocrats.org is the weekly netcast for Democrats who are ready to stand up and fight. Our sponsor, Democrats for America's Future, is all about getting everyday Democrats involved in returning our party to its roots and to success at the ballot box. We helped elect Barack Obama and elect Democratic majorities in Congress. We recruit grassroots Democrats across the country and provide them with up-to-date information on which Democrats are standing up for our principles and need our help. That's why James Carville, Kathleen Kennedy Townsend, Robert Reich, and so many other stand-up Democrats work with us to elect Democrats who aren't afraid to fight for democratic principles. And we're glad you can join us. Our first guest is Kathleen Kennedy Townsend, former Lieutenant Governor of Maryland, author, and niece of John F. Kennedy. Townsend's recent Washington Post op-ed takes Sarah Palin to task for misinterpreting Kennedy's stance on faith and politics. And our guest joining us now, Kathleen Kennedy Townsend, former Lieutenant Governor in the state of Maryland, chair of the Board of Advisors for the Institute of Human Virology at the University of Maryland School of Medicine. Kathleen, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, well, it's really good to be with you.
All right. You recently had an opinion piece in the Washington Post titled, "Sarah Palin is Wrong About John F. Kennedy, Religion, and Politics." Sarah Palin makes some statements about your uncle, John F. Kennedy, in her new book. And she says that he tried to run away from religion, that he failed to tell Americans how his faith had enriched him. Is she right?
Well, I think the question is, should he have done that? And I think that to make how faith enriches you part of the political dialogue can have dangerous consequences, because people who hold faith very dear to them might start to judge you on your faith and the depth of your faith. And I think that what we're trying to do in the United States is judge people not on their faith, but on what their policies are and their programs are. If you do it on the basis of their faith, you run into the issue of a religious test, which is unconstitutional. And and that's what I believe she is getting very close to being arguing for what would be a really unconstitutional program.
Well, religion is part of life. I mean, it's part of, and although there is the separation of church and state, and religion, we all believe, or most of us believe, obviously not Sarah Palin, that religion should be separate from politics. It does constantly seem to creep back into politics. Is that different now than it was back in 1960?
Well, it was certainly strong in 1960, as you know. Norman Vincent Peale sent out a letter saying to all the many Protestant ministers, saying electing a Catholic would mean that the Pope would be in charge of our policy, that it would be very dangerous for America. So that was very much a religious issue. Obviously, when Hubert Humphrey was running in West Virginia, he used as his campaign song, "Give Me That Old Time Religion." He was certainly not talking about a Catholic old-time religion. So there was very much an anti-Catholic prejudice in the United States in 1960. My uncle was well aware of it and knew that it could be dangerous and hurtful to him and to many Catholics who wanted to run for the highest office in the land.
Well, and it's interesting, too, because he took, I believe, somewhere around 80% of the Catholic vote, but he was very, very strong. And you mentioned this in your piece, that he did not want to be considered the Catholic candidate for president, but he was, in fact, and I'm just paraphrasing, I'm the Democratic Party's candidate for president, who also happens to be a Catholic.
Yeah.
Religion today.
I want to make sure that, as he said very eloquently, when people were fighting for the United States in war, they're not asked whether they're Catholic. Or you didn't ask how many Catholics, those who died at the Alamo weren't asked if they were Catholic or Protestant. And why would you want that same question to be given to people who are running for public office? And obviously, you see all the problem if you do that. I think in the last election when Mitt Romney, in a campaign for president of the United States, has to describe what he thinks about Jesus, as whether Jesus is to him the Son of God. I mean, I don't think that's appropriate. I think some people believe he's the Son of God, some people don't. But if you think that is an important issue, you're going to make your judgment based on that rather than on something else, and then you're starting to divide the country along religious lines, which I think the genius of America, what made America exceptional, is the determination not to have us decide on a candidate based on their religious affiliation.
It seems to me, though, that religion intersects socially, scientifically, and politically more today than ever before. Do we need to change the dialogue? I mean, when you have people like Mitt Romney,
I really don't think. I mean, I have to. I think it's a large part, but it is not. I think it's not as strong as it was with Al Smith when I think he lost the presidential election because he was a Catholic. In other words, I think there's been a long history of religious intolerance in our country. So I don't think this is particularly new. I think it's been part of the challenge that Americans face, as all countries face, to how to choose somebody not based on their faith, but based on what they can do. I mean, it's so ironic, I have to tell you. We go we fight a war in Iraq because we say we want to bring freedom. And they have dangerous divisions between the Sunnis and the Shiites based on religious doctrine. And then we say, and then some people over here say, we should bring religion back into politics. I mean, it's just not what America was founded for. It's not what made us exceptional.
How do you respect freedom of religion without alienating those Americans who identify so strongly with their religion?
Well, it means, what do you mean? I guess the question is, what do you mean by identification? I mean, if you believe that you can, if you want to practice your faith, which means, if you want to go to church on Sunday or every day as my mother does, I don't think I'm interfering with her ability to do that by the policies that I implement. I think she can still go to church every day. If she wants to send her children to Catholic school, she can do that. I don't think our policies hurt that. What we don't allow is that we say that we're not going to use tax dollars to proselytize, and I think that's that's a very important distinction.
Is religion then, when we're talking about some of the comments that a Sarah Palin or a Mitt Romney, is just the two samples that we've talked about so far, have brought up, are they using it then? Are they using it politically on purpose without really giving it any thought about the separation?
It's always a very good question to judge why people do certain things. And that's the danger with religion. Why are they bringing up religion? Is it because they sincerely believe it, or because they think that they're going to garner votes by doing this in a particular way? And I think that religion and one's relationship to God should be more precious than to be used politically. So I don't feel like I should be in a position of judging, why do they do that? I can be in a position of judging that I think it's a bad idea, and I think it's a bad idea and not in line with what America offers the world, which is not to have us engage in these kind of religious disputes.
Interestingly, as I grew up and attended Catholic school, grade school, and when I was growing up, and we're talking about in the 60s, there was basically, in the mainstream, or for what we were taught essentially, there was Christianity and there was Judaism. And there wasn't really a lot of mention of any other religions. And today, that's a lot different. Is ignorance coming into play nowadays when we're talking about religions that perhaps we're just not familiar with? You immediately, I think of Muslims that have to walk around scared right now in the United States.
Well, I think it's actually funny that you said when you were growing up there were Christians and Jews, because you grew up in the 60s. Well, I grew up in the 50s, and Catholics weren't really considered Christians. Christians were a different group. We were Catholics, and it's really funny, kind of, and there's still sort of a sense that Catholics are really Christians because we have a pope. It's fascinating about that. You can say it's ignorance, but it might be. It may be ignorance. It may be to beat up on a different religion is a way to gain power for yourself. You know what you're doing, and you're doing it on purpose. So I'm not sure sometimes whether things are out of ignorance or out of just meanness. I mean, I think people can know what they're doing and just not be kind and generous and compassionate.
What do people need to do?
In other words, you can know things are wrong and you do it anyway. Like, people smoke. They know it's bad for you and they do it because for other reasons. So I don't think ignorance is always the answer to why people do things that aren't very helpful.
Sarah Palin, because we're talking again with Kathleen Kennedy Townsend and specifically about the opinion piece that Kathleen wrote in the Washington Post, Sarah Palin is wrong about John F. Kennedy, religion, and politics. Right. And I do sort of believe that she is, in fact, using religion inappropriately here. But how do you go and get that belief across to constituents that perhaps are swayed by some of the things that she or Mitt Romney or others might say?
Well, I think it's kind of interesting. I wrote this article a couple of weeks ago, and she's never responded. And she hasn't come back with a response, which leads me to believe that she is being persuaded that this is not an argument that she is on the winning side of. It was so obvious that she was judging people in the piece when she would say that Nancy Pelosi doesn't walk the walk, as though she can judge whether somebody walks God's walk. I think that is, I think most Americans don't want their politicians telling us who is saved and who isn't. Mm-hmm. I think that would, I don't know when she wrote the book, whether, she paid close enough attention to what she was doing. But I hope my article pointed out just how dangerous the path that she was going down. And I may be wrong, maybe tomorrow she will attack it and defend what she did. But interestingly enough, she hasn't so far. That is interesting because you make that strong an argument one way. Maybe I haven't read the papers myself, but I did this Washington Post conversation online, and I found very, very few people attacked my article at all. Maybe you've seen it, but most people kind of agreed with it. I read a lot of I didn't read all of them, but I did read a good number of them, and there were very, very few that disagreed with. It really disagreed. It might be just the Washington Post reporters, readers, so there's always that sort of slant. But I found it kind of interesting how few people said, no, you don't get it. So I think that I believe that probably we haven't really discussed this fully, and that the fact that I was able to write this and got such wide attention, I have to tell you, to get broad attention, made the argument that John Kennedy was correct. Yeah, indeed. Kathleen Kennedy Townsend, former Lieutenant Governor of Maryland, author of the book Failing America's Faithful, How Today's Churches Are Mixing God with Politics and Losing Their Way. We appreciate your time with us today, Kathleen. We look forward to talking to you again soon. Hey, it was fun to be with you. Thank you. Coming up next, what went wrong for Democrats during the 2010 midterms? We'll ask veteran Democratic political consultant Vic Fingerhut for his take when the AmericasDemocrats.org netcast continues. We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Do you want to get involved and help get our party back to its roots and to success at the ballot box? You can make your contribution to Democrats for America's Future and help us to keep this show going and to elect Democrats who will stand up for democratic principles. Go to AmericasDemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page.